"You'll do what I say or get out," Grant screamed, his voice bouncing off the walls of the conference room. I stood my ground even as his finger jabbed the air inches from my face. "You're just a little girl who doesn't understand business. This is how things work in the real world." The conference room fell silent. 6 other executives sat frozen around the table, eyes darting between us like spectators at a car crash. Nobody moved to defend me. Nobody spoke up. "I understand business perfectly well," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I understand that what you're asking me to do is illegal. I won't falsify those safety reports." Grant's face twisted into something ugly. "Then pack your desk. You're finished here." "And are you firing me for refusing to break the law?" I asked, making sure everyone heard me clearly. His nostrils flared. "I'm firing you for insubordination, for questioning my authority in front of the team." I nodded slowly, gathering my notepad. "I'll need that in writing, please." As I walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor, Grant called after me. "You think you're so smart? You'll never work in this industry again. I'll make sure of it." I didn't turn around. I didn't let him see my face crumple or my hands shake. I walked straight to my office, closed the door, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My phone buzzed exactly 2 hours later. An unfamiliar extension. I answered professionally, as if my entire career wasn't hanging by a thread. "This is Celeste." "Celeste, this is Paul Ewing." The CEO's voice was unmistakable. "We need to talk immediately. My office. Now." I glanced through my glass wall and saw Grant walking past. Our eyes met, and I held up my phone slightly. His face went pale. I expected my job was over. What I didn't expect was that this moment would be just the beginning of the most extraordinary battle of my professional life. One that would test every ounce of my courage, intelligence, and yes, my capacity for revenge. If this story resonates with you so far, please hit like and subscribe to hear more stories about women fighting back against workplace injustice. Your support means everything, and trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Celeste Arman, and until that day, I was the Senior Safety Compliance Director at a major construction materials company. I had spent 8 years building my reputation as meticulous, honest, and uncompromising when it came to safety standards. My team respected me, the board trusted me. Only Grant, my direct supervisor and the chief operations officer, seemed to view my dedication as an obstacle rather than an asset. I grew up in a small town where my father owned the local hardware store. He taught me to measure twice and cut once, to stand behind my work, and to never take shortcuts when safety was on the line. "Buildings fall when people lie," he would say. Those principles guided my career choices and eventually led me to the corporate offices where I'd spent the last 4 years. The company had been preparing to launch a new line of flame-resistant building materials. The preliminary tests showed promising results, but not quite meeting the standards required for the rating Grant wanted to claim. The difference was small, maybe a 12% improvement in flame resistance, when regulations required 15% for the premium classification. "Just adjust the numbers," Grant had instructed during our private meeting the previous day. "Nobody will notice, and we can fix it in the next production run." I had refused immediately, explaining the legal and ethical problems. He seemed to accept my decision, until today's meeting, when he ambushed me in front of the executive team, presenting the falsified reports as if they were already approved, and acting shocked when I objected. As I walked to the CEO's office, my mind raced through possible outcomes. Termination seemed most likely. Paul Ewing had always struck me as fair, but Grant had been with the company for 15 years. I had only 4 years of history here. The math didn't favor me. Paul's assistant ushered me in without making eye contact. "Not a good sign." "Close the door," Paul said, not looking up from his computer. His office was sparse, with just a desk, 3 chairs, and a single family photo. No decorative awards or golf memorabilia like other executives favored. I sat, folded my hands, and waited. "I received an interesting email about an hour ago," Paul finally said, turning his screen toward me. "It appears to be a recording of your meeting with Grant this morning." My pulse quickened. "I didn't record anything." "No, you didn't." He clicked play. The audio was crystal clear. Grant's voice filled the room, instructing everyone to adjust testing figures before market submission. Then my refusal. His threat. All of it. "Who sent this?" I asked. "Anonymous email address," but the sender included copies of the original test results and Grant's altered versions. Paul leaned forward, Tell me your version. I explained everything, from the initial testing disappointments to Grant's private request to today's public confrontation. Paul listened without interruption, his expression unchanged. When I finished, he nodded once. Grant tells a different story. Says you've been difficult to work with, undermining his authority, refusing reasonable requests. My stomach tightened. Of course, Grant would spin this. Is asking me to break federal safety regulations a reasonable request? I asked. Paul almost smiled. No, it's not. He stood up. Grant is on administrative leave pending investigation. I need you to compile a complete report of the test results, including any communication about modifications. I blinked. You believe me? I believe evidence, Paul replied. And I need more of it. This stays between us for now. As I walked back to my office, relief mixed with apprehension. Grant wouldn't go down without a fight. His connections throughout the industry were extensive. Even if he was terminated, he could make good on his threat to destroy my reputation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. Hope it was worth it. I stared at the message, a chill settling over me. Grant wouldn't just try to ruin my career. He would try to break me completely. The next morning, I arrived early to find my office door ajar. Nothing obvious was missing, but my files looked slightly rearranged. The cleaning crew didn't touch my desk. Company policy for confidential materials. By noon, rumors were circulating. People whispered as I passed. My team seemed nervous during our status meeting. Finally, Iris, my most trusted analyst, stayed behind. People are saying you tried to falsify safety reports and blamed Grant when you got caught, she said quietly. They're saying that's why he's not here. The room seemed to tilt. Who's saying that? It came from Vince in marketing. He said he heard it directly from Grant last night. It came from Vince in marketing. Vince, Grant's golf buddy and drinking companion. Of course, that's completely backwards, I said. I can't discuss details, but please know it's not true. Iris nodded, but doubt lingered in her expression. The damage was spreading. I spent the afternoon gathering every email, report, and notation related to the testing process. My office door remained locked. At 6 p.m., Paul called me back to his office. The board is concerned, he said without preamble. Grant has friends there. They're pushing for an independent investigation. That should clear things up, I said, trying to sound confident. Paul's expression darkened. Not necessarily. Grant's been removing documents from the system. Digital footprints are disappearing. My blood ran cold. That's why someone was in my office. He's covering his tracks. Likely. But we don't know who sent the recording. Or why. Paul looked troubled. The board meets tomorrow at 9 a.m. Both you and Grant will present your versions. I started to protest, but Paul held up his hand. I know it seems unfair, but Grant's claiming whistleblower protection, saying you threatened him when he discovered your tampering. The audacity stole my breath. That's insane. It's calculated, Paul corrected. He's turning this into a, he said, she said situation. Without concrete proof, the board may choose the easier path, which is letting you both go to avoid scandal. I left Paul's office feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Grant was systematically dismantling my defense before I could even build it. The recording should have been enough, but if he claimed I'd doctored it or taken his words out of context. That night, another text arrived. Board's already decided. Enjoy unemployment. I sat in my darkened apartment, possibilities spinning through my mind. If I lost this battle, Grant wouldn't just win. He'd ensure I never worked in the industry again. His influence extended too far. For the first time, a new emotion pushed through my anxiety. Rage. Pure, clarifying rage. If Grant wanted war, I would give him one. But I wouldn't fight dirty like him. I would fight smart. I opened my laptop and began to plan. Morning came too quickly. I showered, dressed in my most professional Navy suit, and arrived at the office an hour before the board meeting. The building was eerily quiet except for the distant rumble of the HVAC system and occasional clicking of early arriving keyboards. I needed allies, not just for moral support, but for what I was planning. Iris arrived at 7:30, her eyes widening when she saw me waiting by her cubicle. I need to ask you something important, I said, keeping my voice low. Did you notice anything unusual about the testing process for the new materials? She hesitated, glancing around the empty office. You mean besides Grant rushing everyone? Yes. Anything about access to samples or test equipment. Understanding dawned on her face. The missing samples. 3 weeks ago, Grant said they were contaminated and removed them from the lab. This was new information. Which batch numbers? The ones that failed most significantly. B17 through B22. I nodded, adding this to my mental file. Iris, I may need your help today. If you're asked about testing protocols during my time here, will you tell the truth? Of course. She looked offended that I'd even asked. Celeste, most of us know what's happening isn't right. We just don't know how to help. Her words strengthened my resolve. Thank you. That matters more than you know. At 8:45, I walked into the boardroom with my head high. 2 security guards stood near the entrance, unusual for a board meeting. Their presence confirmed my suspicions about how Grant was positioning this confrontation. The boardroom filled gradually with directors in expensive suits, their expressions carefully neutral as they took their seats around the massive table. Paul nodded slightly when our eyes met, but offered nothing more. At precisely 9, Grant walked in, looking remarkably composed for someone under investigation. He'd chosen a charcoal suit that emphasized his athletic build, his silver-streaked hair freshly trimmed. Image was everything to Grant, and today was no exception. Let's begin, said Harriet Vale, the board chairwoman. Her voice carried natural authority despite her diminutive stature. We're here to address serious allegations concerning safety compliance protocols. Grant went first, his presentation slick and practiced. He described finding irregularities in testing data and confronting me about them. According to his version, I'd become defensive and threatened to blame him if the issues became public. He painted himself as the reluctant whistleblower, forced to act when I refused to correct my mistakes. I've always prioritized safety, he concluded solemnly, but I also understand business realities. There are proper channels for addressing testing shortfalls without compromising either safety or business objectives. Unfortunately, Ms. Armin rejected those options. Several board members nodded. My anger burned hotter, but I kept my expression neutral. When my turn came, I didn't waste time defending myself directly. Instead, I presented facts, dates, testing protocols, comparative analysis of our materials against industry standards. The data shows our new product line achieves a 12.4% improvement in flame resistance, I explained. Federal standards require 15% for the premium classification Grant wanted to claim. That seems like a small difference, one director commented. Couldn't additional testing find parameters that would achieve compliance? Absolutely, I agreed. That's exactly what I recommended. Additional development before market release, which would cost another 6 months and approximately $7 million. Grant interjected. Completely unnecessary when competitive analysis shows our 12.4% outperforms similar products already marketed with premium classification. Those products were grandfathered in under older standards, I countered. New products must meet current regulations. The technical discussion continued for nearly an hour. I could see several directors growing restless, eyes glazing over at the detailed explanations of testing methodology. This was Grant's strategy. Make it so technically complex that they default to trusting the longer-tenured executive. Harriet finally interrupted. While this technical debate is informative, it doesn't address the core issue. We have conflicting accounts of who instructed whom to falsify reports. Without clear evidence, this becomes a matter of credibility. Grant smiled slightly. He thought he'd won. I agree completely, I said, which is why I'd like to present one more piece of information. I slid a USB drive across the table to Harriet. This contains something that might clarify matters. Grant's smile faltered. What is this? Harriet asked. It's a video recording from our materials lab 3 weeks ago. It shows Mr. Reynolds removing test samples from secure storage, 1/7, specifically batches B17 through B22, which had failed to meet premium standards. The color drained from Grant's face. You can't just... The lab has security cameras, Grant, I said quietly. Always has. Paul inserted the drive into his laptop and turned the screen toward the board. The footage clearly showed Grant entering the lab after hours, removing specific sample containers, and leaving with them in his briefcase. This is taken out of context, Grant sputtered. Those samples were contaminated. I was removing them for specialized testing. If that were true, I replied, there would be transfer documentation and results from the external testing facility. There aren't any. The board members exchanged glances. The momentum was shifting. Furthermore, I continued, I've prepared a timeline of all communications regarding the testing process. including emails where Mr. Reynolds instructed the team to find ways to make the numbers work, despite the initial results. Grant's composure cracked entirely. "She's manipulating you all. This is a personal vendetta, because I wouldn't approve her promotion last quarter." The outburst hung in the air, his desperation evident to everyone. Harriet's gaze hardened. "Mr. Reynolds, please control yourself." But Grant wasn't finished. He turned to me, eyes blazing. "You think you're so clever? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I built this department. Half the people in this room owe me favors." "Grant," Paul warned, "that's enough." "No, it's not enough." Grant stood, pointing at me. "She's been planning this for months. Ask her about the mysterious recording of our meeting. She claims she didn't make it, but who else would benefit?" I remained seated, maintaining my composure. "I didn't record that meeting, but clearly someone in the room was concerned enough about your behavior to document it." The board deliberation that followed was brief and decisive. Grant was placed on indefinite leave pending further investigation. I was to continue my duties with direct reporting to Paul until the matter was fully resolved. As we filed out of the boardroom, Grant shouldered past me, whispering, "This isn't over. Not even close." I believed him. The next 2 weeks brought an uneasy calm. External investigators interviewed staff and reviewed records. I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild trust with my team and stabilize our department. Then the whispers started again. Clients were calling, concerned about rumors they'd heard regarding our testing protocols. Investors were asking questions. Someone was talking to people outside the company, casting doubt on our entire compliance history. Paul called me to his office on a rainy Thursday afternoon. "The damage control isn't working," he said without preamble. "Grant's calling in every favor he has. 3 board members are now suggesting we need fresh leadership in safety compliance to restore confidence." My heart sank. "They're going to let me go after all." "Not if I can help it," Paul replied. "But Grant's playing the long game. He's attacking the company itself, knowing the board will eventually decide someone has to take the fall. And between you and him, I'm the easier sacrifice." I finished. Paul didn't disagree. That evening, my home phone rang, a number I rarely gave out. "Celeste?" The voice was vaguely familiar. "Yes? It's Donna, Grant's assistant." My guard immediately went up. "What can I do for you, Donna? I need to talk to you." "Not on the phone. It's about what Grant's doing." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop 20 minutes from the office. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the entrance, and waited. Donna arrived looking nervous, her eyes darting around the cafe before she sat down. "I shouldn't be here," she said immediately. "Grant would." She stopped herself. "Would what, Donna?" She twisted her coffee cup in her hands. "He's not just trying to get you fired anymore. He's trying to make sure you never work again. Anywhere." "How?" "He's been calling former clients where safety issues occurred, suggesting you might have overlooked problems." She lowered her voice. "He's even contacted state licensing boards with concerns about your professional conduct." The systematic destruction of my professional reputation was underway, just as he'd promised. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Donna hesitated. "Because I've worked for Grant for 7 years. This isn't the first time he's done something like this, but it's the first time I've seen someone fight back effectively." She reached into her purse and slid a small notebook across the table. "These are the people he's contacted, and the things he's telling them." I flipped through pages of meticulously noted names, companies, and talking points. "You kept records of this?" She nodded. "Grant dictates everything. I've been writing it all down for years, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case someone finally stood up to him." Her eyes met mine. "He ruins people, Celeste. Not just careers, lives." As I drove home, the notebook beside me felt both dangerous and precious. Donna had given me ammunition, but using it would mean escalating this fight beyond the boardroom, beyond professional disagreement into personal destruction. Was I ready for that? Could I match Grant's ruthlessness without becoming like him? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Board votes tomorrow. Hope you weren't planning on any job interviews next week or next year." Grant was still one step ahead, still confident in his victory. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, engine off, rain pattering on the roof. Through my windshield, I could see lights on in my house, lights I hadn't left on when I departed that morning. Someone was inside my home. I sat frozen, staring at my illuminated living room windows. The house had definitely been dark when I left that morning. I remembered double-checking the lights as part of my daily routine. My first instinct was to call the police, but something held me back. If this was Grant's doing, involving authorities might escalate things unpredictably. Rain drummed harder on the car roof as I weighed my options. Leave? Confront? I reached for my phone just as my front door opened, casting a rectangle of light onto my porch. A man stepped out. Not Grant, but someone I'd never seen before. He was thin, professional-looking, wearing a dark windbreaker. He pulled the door closed behind him, tested the knob to ensure it was locked, then walked calmly to a sedan parked across the street. I slid down in my seat, heart pounding as he drove away. Only when his taillights disappeared around the corner did I dare move. With trembling hands, I called Iris. "Can you come over? Right now, I need a witness," I said when she answered. "What's happening?" Alarm filled her voice. "Someone was in my house. Just bring your phone with a camera, please." 20 minutes later, Iris stood beside me on my porch as I unlocked my front door. We stepped inside cautiously. Nothing looked obviously disturbed at first glance. No ransacked drawers or overturned furniture. But as we moved deeper into the house, subtle wrongness emerged. My laptop was closed. I always left it open. A cabinet door in the kitchen stood slightly ajar. The throw pillows on my couch had been rearranged. "Someone definitely searched this place," Iris said, voice barely above a whisper. We found the first camera in my bedroom, nestled between books on a shelf, a tiny lens barely visible. The second was under my kitchen table, disguised as a power outlet. The third, most disturbing of all, was pointed directly at my shower. "This is illegal," Iris said, photographing each device without touching them. Like, seriously criminal. "It's also exactly what Grant would do," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "He wants to watch me panic, wants to gather anything he can use against me." We found 5 cameras in total. I left them in place. "Aren't you going to remove them?" Iris asked, incredulous. I shook my head. "Not yet. If I take them out, he'll know I found them. I need time to think." That night, I slept on Iris's couch, my mind racing with implications and possibilities. Grant had escalated beyond professional sabotage to personal invasion. The board vote loomed tomorrow. My options were diminishing by the hour. Morning brought clarity and resolve. I showered and dressed at Iris's apartment, then drove to the office for what might be my last day. In my purse sat Donna's notebook for my nuclear option. The corridors felt charged with tension as I walked to my office. People watched me pass, their expressions a mixture of pity and curiosity. News of the board vote had clearly spread. Paul met me at my door. "Board meeting's been moved up. 9 o'clock. I checked my watch. 8:37. "That's not much notice." "It wasn't my decision," he said grimly. "Grant's been busy." I know exactly how busy he's been," I replied, thinking of the cameras hidden throughout my home. The boardroom was already full when we arrived. Grant sat near Harriet, their heads bent together in conversation. He looked up as I entered, his smile cold and triumphant. "Celeste," Harriet began once everyone was seated, "I'll be direct. Concerns have been raised about your judgment and the department's integrity under your leadership. The board feels a change may be necessary to restore client confidence." "What specific concerns?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Multiple clients have contacted us regarding past safety certifications. They're questioning whether proper protocols were followed." Harriet slid a folder toward me. "These incidents occurred under your supervision." I opened the folder to find a list of projects, all ones where Grant had overridden my recommendations but kept my signature on the final approvals. "I see," I said quietly, closing the folder. "And what does Grant say about these projects?" Grant straightened. "I've simply shared my concerns that oversight may have been inadequate during critical certifications." "Interesting." I placed my hands flat on the table. "Before we continue, I'd like to address the board about a related matter." Harriet frowned. "We have a tight agenda today, Celeste. This will only take a moment," I insisted, "and it's directly relevant to these allegations." She nodded reluctantly. I took a deep breath. "Last night, someone broke into my home and installed hidden surveillance cameras throughout my house, including my bedroom and bathroom. I have documented and photographed these devices with a witness present." The room fell silent. Grant's expression didn't change, but I noticed his fingers tighten around his pen. "That's terrible," Harriet said, looking genuinely shocked. "Have you contacted the police?" "Not yet. I wanted to address this with the board first. because I believe it's connected to our current situation. Connected how? One of the directors asked. The timing is suspicious. Coming the night before this vote, someone wants to gather compromising information about me or intimidate me into resignation before today's meeting. All eyes briefly flicked toward Grant, who scoffed. That's an outrageous insinuation. I had nothing to do with any break-in. I haven't accused anyone specifically, I replied calmly. I'm simply making the board aware of escalating attempts to undermine my position and personal safety. Harriet looked troubled. While concerning, this alleged break-in doesn't address the client complaints before us. Actually, it does. I pulled Donna's notebook from my purse. I've received information about a coordinated campaign to contact clients and regulatory agencies with manufactured concerns about my work. This notebook contains detailed records of those communications. Grant's face darkened. What notebook? Let me see that. I handed it directly to Harriet instead. You'll find dates, names, and talking points designed to create exactly the kind of doubt we're discussing today. As Harriet flipped through the pages, Grant's composure began to crack. That's Donna's handwriting. She's been working against me. This is completely fabricated. Is it? I asked. The projects listed in your complaint folder match exactly with the ones mentioned in these notes. Projects where you overrode my safety concerns but kept my signature on the approvals. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. This is getting out of hand, Harriet declared. We need to— There's one more thing, I interrupted, my heart racing. The surveillance cameras in my home, I didn't remove them. They're still transmitting. To whom, I wonder? I pulled out my phone and opened an app. This signal detector identifies wireless transmissions. Would anyone object if I use it right now in this room? Grant stood abruptly. This is absurd. I don't have to sit here and be subjected to this witch hunt. No one has accused you of anything yet, Grant, Paul said mildly. Why are you so defensive? I activated the app and slowly walked around the table. The signal strength remained steady until I approached Grant's position. The app's reading spiked dramatically. Interesting, I said, turning my phone so others could see the display. The signal is strongest right here. This proves nothing, Grant snarled, but sweat had appeared on his forehead. May I? Paul asked, extending his hand toward Grant's suit jacket pocket. You have no right, Grant began, but Paul had already reached in and pulled out a small receiver. The silence that followed was deafening. I've never seen that before, Grant insisted, his voice rising. Someone planted that on me. Harriet's expression had transformed from skepticism to disgust. Mr. Reynolds, I think you should leave this meeting. Security will escort you from the building. The board will contact you after we've discussed this situation. Grant looked around the table, finding no allies in the faces staring back at him. This isn't over, he hissed at me as security arrived. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I replied quietly, I think I do. After Grant's departure, the meeting continued for another hour. The board decided to suspend judgment on my position pending a full investigation into Grant's actions. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a reprieve. As the room emptied, Paul stayed behind with me. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, he said. Sometimes those are the same thing, I replied. He shook his head. Grant won't stop. You've humiliated him now. He'll come at you harder. I'm counting on it. The immediate threat had passed, but as I walked back to my office, I knew this was merely the beginning of the real battle. Grant had resources, connections, and now a personal vendetta. My evidence had bought me time, nothing more. 3 days passed without incident. The security team removed the cameras from my home. Donna was placed on administrative leave for her own protection. External investigators began examining the projects Grant had flagged. I was working late when my office phone rang. Hello? You think you've won? Grant's voice slithered through the line. Check your email. The call disconnected. I opened my inbox with trembling fingers to find a message from an anonymous address. The subject line read simply, Your father. In quote, the email contained a single image, a father's hardware store, with a bright red foreclosure notice plastered across the front window. My father called 10 minutes later, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. Someone bought my business loan from the bank, Celeste. They're calling it due immediately. 30 years in business, and they're giving me 48 hours to pay or get out. Ice filled my veins. How much? $320,000. I don't have it, sweetheart. Not even close. Grant had found my vulnerability. Not my career, Not my reputation, but my family. I drove home in a daze, possibilities and dead ends cycling through my mind. I had savings, but nowhere near enough. No bank would approve a loan that quickly. Grant had calculated perfectly. He'd found an attack I couldn't defend against. When I pulled into my driveway, a familiar car was waiting. Donna sat behind the wheel, her face pale in the darkness. "He's going after your father," she said as I approached. "I know. This is what he does, Celeste. Finds what matters most and takes it away. He did it to me 3 years ago with my brother's business." I stared at her. "Why are you telling me this?" Because I want to help you stop him. For good." She handed me a thumb drive. "Everything's on here. Everything he's done. Not just at the company. Private accounts. Recordings of meetings with clients. His real estate holdings under different names." I took the drive, its weight insignificant compared to what it represented. "Why didn't you use this yourself?" Donna smiled sadly. "I was afraid. Still am. But he's never been this exposed before. You've already done what no one else could. Make the board question him. With this." She gestured at the drive. "You can finish it. He's foreclosing on my father's store in 48 hours. Then you don't have much time." She started her car. "Be careful, Celeste. And be thorough. If you strike and don't take him down completely, there won't be a second chance." As Donna drove away, I stood in my driveway, clutching the thumb drive. Grant had pushed me into a corner, forcing me to choose between surrender and all-out war. I plugged the drive into my laptop and began reading. Hours passed as I absorbed the extent of Grant's corruption, falsified reports going back years, kickbacks from contractors, blackmail of inspectors. The pattern was clear and damning. But one file stood out from the others, a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were details of an offshore account containing millions, along with provisional paperwork for a home purchase in a non-extradition country. Grant had an escape plan. He'd always had an escape plan. By dawn, I knew what I had to do, not just to save my father's store, but to ensure Grant could never hurt anyone again. It would require perfect timing, unflinching nerve, and a willingness to risk everything. I made 3 phone calls, sent 7 emails, and booked a flight. Then I drove to my father's store, arriving just as he was unlocking the front door. His shoulders slumped with defeat, his normally cheerful face drawn with worry. "I've been trying to call the loan company," he said as I approached. "No one answers. Just voicemail. They won't answer," I told him. "This isn't about money. It's about hurting me." His expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Your boss? The one who tried to get you fired?" I nodded. "He's escalating, using you to get to me." My father's weathered hands clenched into fists. "I'll go bankrupt before I let someone use my business to hurt my daughter." "It won't come to that," I promised, though I wasn't entirely sure I could keep that promise. "I have a plan." "What kind of plan?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "The less you know right now, the better. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He studied my face for a long moment. "Always have." As I drove away from my childhood home, possibly for the last time, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tick-tock. 36 hours left. Ready to beg yet?" I didn't respond. Grant wanted me desperate, pleading, broken. He wanted to savor my defeat. Instead, I was coldly, perfectly focused on what needed to happen next. My flight departed in 3 hours. I had just enough time to set everything in motion. The airport terminal buzzed with early morning travelers, but I barely registered them as I moved toward my gate. My carry-on contained only essentials, a change of clothes, my laptop, and Donna's thumb drive safely tucked into an inner pocket. My checked bag held everything else I might need for what was coming. My destination, Grand Cayman. My target, Whale Crest Holdings, the shell company Grant had established to hold his insurance policy funds. As I boarded my flight, my phone buzzed with a text from Paul. "Board emergency meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Grant demanding reinstatement and your termination. Be careful." I powered off my phone as the flight attendant approached. For the next few hours, I would be unreachable. A terrifying but necessary silence while Grant continued his assault on my family's livelihood. The flight gave me time to review the documents Donna had provided. Grant had meticulously built his escape route over years, siphoning funds from various projects into offshore accounts under layers of corporate entities. The money trail was complex, but not impossible to follow if you knew where to look. And thanks to Donna, I knew exactly where to look. Grand Cayman greeted me with sweltering heat and blinding sunshine. I took a taxi directly to the financial district, a collection of gleaming buildings housing hundreds of shell companies and hidden fortunes. Grant's particular bank occupied a modest building with heavy security and discreet signage. The receptionist smiled professionally as I approached. "How may I help you today?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Neville," I said, using the name Donna had provided, regarding Whalecrest Holdings. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened with interest. "And your name?" "Marion Reynolds," I replied, using Grant's wife's first name and his surname. According to Donna's files, this was the authorized identity Grant had established for emergency access. "One moment, please." 5 minutes later, I was escorted to a private office where a thin man with a crisp British accent greeted me. "Mrs. Reynolds, a pleasure. We don't often see our clients in person." He gestured to a chair. "How may we assist you today?" "I need to execute the contingency protocol," I said, using the exact phrasing from Grant's documents. Mr. Neville's expression remained neutral, but his posture stiffened slightly. "I see. That's quite serious. May I ask what's prompted this?" "My husband is facing imminent legal troubles. We need to secure the assets immediately." He nodded. "Of course. I'll need to verify your identity and authorization codes." This was the moment of truth. Donna had provided what she believed were the correct codes, but if she was wrong, or if Grant had changed them, my plan would collapse before it began. I recited the alphanumeric sequence from memory. Mr. Neville typed it into his computer, his eyes scanning the screen. "Everything appears to be in order, Mrs. Reynolds." He smiled thinly. "How would you like to proceed with the funds?" Relief flooded through me, but I kept my expression businesslike. "I'll need 2 transfers. First, $325,000 to this account." I slid a paper with my father's business account information across the desk. "The remainder should go here." I provided the second account number, a special escrow account I had established through Paul's lawyer. Mr. Neville raised an eyebrow at the second account. "That's quite unusual. This appears to be an escrow account." "Yes, for security." He hesitated, then nodded. "As you wish. The transfers will be complete within the hour. Will you be waiting?" "I'll return this afternoon for confirmation," I replied, rising from my chair. "Thank you for your assistance." Back on the street, I finally allowed myself a moment of trembling relief. Phase 1 complete. Grant's insurance policy, nearly $4 million, was now beyond his reach. The money to save my father's store was on its way, but the most dangerous part of my plan still lay ahead. I checked into my hotel, showered, and changed clothes. My phone, when I turned it back on, exploded with notifications. 3 missed calls from my father, 5 from Paul. A text from an unknown number, 24 hours left. Hope Daddy likes unemployment. I called my father first. "The bank just called," he said without preamble. "The loan's been satisfied, paid in full." "What did you do?" "I found a way to make things right," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but I'm worried about you." "Where are you?" "I can't say right now, but I'll be home soon, I promise." Next, I called Paul. "Grant's gone ballistic," he said immediately. "He's calling everyone on the board, making wild accusations about you stealing company funds." "What's happening, Celeste?" "I'm handling it," I replied, "but I need you to do something for me." "Is the meeting still on for tomorrow?" "Yes, 9 a.m. Make sure everyone's there, and have security ready." "Ready for what?" "Everything." My final call was to Iris. "Is it ready?" I asked. "All set up, just like you asked." "But Celeste, this is crazy. If it backfires, it won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Just make sure the timing is perfect." After a restless night, I returned to the bank the following morning. Mr. Neville confirmed both transfers had been completed successfully. I thanked him and left, boarding my return flight with just hours to spare before the board meeting. Landing back home with barely enough time, I rushed directly to the office. Dawn was just breaking as I entered the building, the security guard raising his eyebrows at my early arrival. "Big day?" he asked. "The biggest," I replied. In my office, I found Iris waiting with my laptop already connected to the boardroom's presentation system. "Everything's loaded," she said nervously. "The video feed is ready to go. Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely sure." I checked my watch. "Grant will be here in about 30 minutes. I need to get changed." From my checked bag, I pulled a garment bag containing a suit identical to the one I'd worn the day Grant had called me a little girl in front of the executive team. A calculated psychological trigger. At 8:45, I took my position in the boardroom, sitting calmly at the table as board members began to filter in. Paul arrived early, his questioning look met with my reassuring nod. At 8:57, Grant strode in, flanked by a man I recognized as a high-powered attorney from a prestigious firm. Grant barely glanced my way, his attention focused on Harriet as she called the meeting to order. "We're here to address serious allegations from both Mr. Reynolds and Miss Arman," Harriet began. "In the interest of fairness, we'll hear from both parties before making any decisions." Grant's attorney spoke first, his voice smooth and practiced. "My client has been the victim of a coordinated campaign to discredit him professionally. The evidence presented at the previous meeting was fabricated by a disgruntled assistant. Furthermore, we have reason to believe Ms. Arman has engaged in financial impropriety, possibly even embezzlement." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "That's a serious accusation," Harriet noted. "Do you have evidence?" "We're gathering it now," the attorney replied. "But the timing of Ms. Arman's sudden disappearance yesterday is certainly suspicious." All eyes turned to me. "Ms. Arman," Harriet said, "would you like to respond?" "I would." I stood slowly, moving to the presentation console. "But first, I'd like to ask Mr. Reynolds a direct question." Grant's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "How's your insurance policy doing today?" I asked quietly. The color drained from Grant's face. His attorney looked confused. "I don't know what you're talking about," Grant said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really? Whalecrest Holdings doesn't ring a bell? The $4 million you've been hiding offshore doesn't seem familiar?" The attorney leaned toward Grant, whispering urgently. Grant waved him off. "These are baseless accusations," Grant snapped. "You're trying to distract from your own misconduct." "Am I?" I pressed a button on the console, and the boardroom screen illuminated with banking documents. "These are records from your Cayman Islands account. The account you've been funneling company funds into for years as your personal escape plan." The board members leaned forward, examining the documents with growing alarm. "This is preposterous," Grant's attorney interjected. "These documents could easily be falsified." "They could be," I agreed, "except that yesterday I flew to Grand Cayman and withdrew every cent from that account." The room fell silent. Grant's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "That's impossible," he whispered. "You couldn't have accessed your emergency protocol? Used your wife's name and your authorization codes? The same codes you keep in your personal safe, which Donna photographed months ago as her own insurance policy against you?" Grant lunged to his feet. "You stole my money!" Actually, I recovered stolen money," I corrected him. "Money you embezzled from this company over years, and I didn't keep it. I changed the display to show the escrow account. It's all here, in an account controlled by the company's outside counsel, minus the amount you used to try to destroy my father's business." The attorney was frantically gathering his papers. "This meeting is over. My client has nothing further to say without..." My client has nothing further to say without..." "Without what?" I interrupted. "Without explaining the illegal surveillance equipment he planted in my home? Without addressing the forged safety reports in his desk drawer? Or maybe without discussing the blackmail he's been using against building inspectors for the past 5 years?" I clicked to the next slide, a video feed showing Grant's home office. On his desk sat an open laptop, its screen clearly visible. "Right now, federal investigators are executing a search warrant at your home," I said calmly. "Based on evidence I provided yesterday regarding safety fraud and corporate embezzlement, they should be finding your private records right about now." On cue, agents appeared in the video feed, entering Grant's office with boxes and evidence bags. Grant's composure shattered completely. "You little..." He lunged toward me, only to be intercepted by security guards, who had quietly entered the room during my presentation. "I've spent the past 48 hours cooperating with federal authorities," I explained to the stunned board members as Grant struggled against the guards, "providing documentation of years of safety violations, financial fraud, and witness intimidation. The company itself isn't implicated, neither yet, but could face significant liability if it doesn't demonstrate immediate and thorough cooperation." Harriet found her voice first. "You should have come to the board with this information." "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "Or would you have sided with the executive who's been here 15 years longer than me? The one with friends throughout this room?" No one answered. "Grant," I said, turning to face him directly. "You called me a little girl who doesn't understand business. You threatened my career, invaded my home, and attacked my family. You thought I would either surrender or fight you on your terms. I smiled thinly. I chose differently. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, legal discussions, and emergency damage control. Grant was escorted from the building in handcuffs, his attorney trailing helplessly behind. The board entered emergency session to discuss the company's response to the federal investigation. Paul found me in my office late that afternoon. "The board wants to see you," he said. "To fire me?" I asked, surprisingly calm at the prospect. "To offer you Grant's position, with conditions, of course. Full cooperation with authorities. Complete transparency moving forward." I nodded slowly. "I can live with that. What you did was incredibly risky," Paul said. "If any part of your plan had failed, it didn't fail because Grant never imagined I could beat him at his own game. He saw me as a threat to neutralize, not an opponent to respect." I closed my laptop. That was his mistake. 3 months later, I stood in my father's hardware store, helping him arrange a new display of power tools. The business was thriving. The foreclosure threat had actually generated local support and new customers. "Still can't believe how it all turned out," my father said, adjusting a drill on the shelf. "That man tried to take everything from us and lost everything himself instead," I finished. Grant had pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges to avoid a longer sentence. The company had survived the scandal with minimal damage, thanks to our full cooperation with investigators. And I had stepped into a leadership role I never anticipated, working to rebuild a culture of genuine safety compliance. My phone buzzed with a text from Iris. "Turn on Channel 7. I grabbed the remote for the small TV in my father's office and switched to the local news. A reporter stood outside the federal courthouse. Former executive Grant Reynolds was sentenced today to 7 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and witness intimidation. Reynolds, once considered an industry leader, was brought down by evidence provided by his former subordinate, who exposed a years-long pattern of safety violations and financial crimes. My father squeezed my shoulder. "You did good, kiddo." I nodded, a complicated mix of emotions washing over me. Not triumph or glee, but something quieter, the satisfaction of justice served, of standing my ground when it mattered most. That night, I sat on my porch watching the sunset, reflecting on everything that had happened. The cameras were long gone from my home. Grant's threats were silenced. My career was secure, stronger, even, than before. Yet something had fundamentally changed within me. I had discovered capacities I never knew I possessed, for strategy, for calculated risk, for the kind of resolute courage that doesn't waver even when everything is at stake. I had also learned that sometimes, the only way to defeat a bully is to be smarter, more patient, and more strategic than they ever expected you could be. Not by becoming like them, but by using their own tactics against them while maintaining your principles. If you've ever faced someone who underestimated you, who dismissed you as just a little girl or not understanding their world, I hope this story reminds you that sometimes the most powerful response isn't an immediate reaction, but a carefully planned checkmate they never see coming. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about standing up to workplace bullies and the sweet satisfaction of professional justice. Have you ever been underestimated at work? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters. And who knows? Maybe your strategy will help someone else facing their own Grant Reynolds.